U.S. history sweeps through a string of conflicts that have ultimately made the country the world's greatest military power and have also shaped the global geopolitical landscape. From the War of Independence establishing the United States as a sovereign entity to contemporary military interventions in regions such as the Middle East and Afghanistan, America's military footprint has remained a constant in world history. Today's video looks at every war the U.S. has ever been involved in its extensive military history. The United States of America came into being on the back of its first war, the American War of Independence, otherwise known as the American Revolution, between 1775 and 1783. This conflict prompted the 13 colonies in North America to gain independence from the British Empire. Originally, this revolutionary movement started as a quarrel over the right of the American colonists to rule themselves and withstand British tax policies. Armed hostilities started with the battles of Lexington and Concord in April 1775. The Second Continental Congress reacted by forming the Continental Army, headed by George Washington. On July 4, 1776, Congress approved the Declaration of Independence, primarily drafted by Thomas Jefferson, proclaiming the sovereignty of the colonies. The conflict was a long and challenging affair for the American forces, facing the powerful British Army and Hessian mercenaries, with significant battles such as Saratoga as a crucial turning point in the war. British General John Burgoyne's surrender after it persuaded France that the Americans stood a real chance of winning, pushing them to enter the war on the side of the colonies. French support was vital to the American war effort. After the American victory at Saratoga, French assistance was key, providing essential military and naval support. The Battle of Yorktown was the final and decisive engagement of the war. The siege of Yorktown, with the French and American forces working in tandem, led to the surrender of British General Lord Cornwallis. The victory at Yorktown brought an effective end to hostilities. The conflict concluded with the 1783 Treaty of Paris, formally recognizing the United States' independence. This influenced other independence campaigns around the world. The American Indian Wars comprised several conflicts between Native American peoples. These clashes were typified by a succession of battles, campaigns, and massacres, frequently resulting in the forced removal of native tribes from their ancestral lands. Policies such as the Doctrine of Manifest Destiny, promoting the United States' belief in territorial expansion as inevitable and warranted, heightened tensions. The United States clashed with several indigenous nations, including tribes such as the Cherokee, Sioux, Comanche, Apache, Navajos, and many more. Each of these nations had their own cultures, territories, and interaction backgrounds with the colonizers. Confrontations ranged in scale and intensity from small skirmishes to drawn-out wars. Some of the most notable include the Black Hawk War, the Seminole Wars, the 1862 Sioux War, the Apache Wars, and the Battle of Little Bighorn. Most of these ended with agreements that were seldom beneficial to the indigenous peoples and often resulted in their forced relocation to reservations. The aftermath of these wars was crippling for Native American peoples, resulting in significant losses of life, land, and culture. On top of this, U.S. expansion continued to exert pressure on indigenous lands, resulting in even more conflicts and displacement. The War of 1812, also known as the United States' Second War of Independence between the United States and the British Empire, lasted from 1812 to 1815. The war's major triggers included the British trade restrictions enforced as part of its naval blockade against France during the Napoleonic Wars, and the British practice of impressment, consisting of capturing American sailors and forcing them into servitude in the Royal Navy. There were also tensions over American westward expansion and British support for Native American tribes in opposing this spread. The outbreak of the war was fraught with military challenges for the United States, facing several defeats in attempts to invade Canada, then a British colony. Outnumbered at sea, the United States scored several notable triumphs, such as the USS Constitution's defeat of the HMS Gruyere. The conflict witnessed significant moments, such as the Battle of Baltimore and the Battle of New Orleans, where the American forces led by Andrew Jackson won a decisive victory in January 1815. The peace treaty mostly reinstated pre-war frontier conditions and did not resolve many of the underlying issues that brought about the conflict. The war did, however, strengthen American nationalism. After securing its independence and expanding westward, the United States clashed with Mexico. The Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848 stemmed from territorial squabbles and was a crucial point in the United States' territorial expansion under the Manifest Destiny Doctrine. This conflict was ignited by the U.S. annexation of Texas in 1845. Texas had become independent from Mexico in 1836, but the latter never granted it independence and considered it a rebel province. When the United States annexed Texas, territorial disputes between Texas and Mexico flared up. U.S. President James K. Polk, a supporter of territorial expansionism, sent troops into the contested area, leading to fighting that triggered the war. The quarrel was marred by several major battles, such as the battles of Palo Alto, Monterrey, and Buena Vista in northern Mexico, and Winfield Scott's dramatic campaign that ended up capturing Mexico City. The 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo put a formal end to the war. This agreement saw Mexico relinquish a large amount of territory to the United States, including the current states of California, Nevada, Utah, most of Arizona, parts of New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. The 1861 to 1865 American Civil War turned into one of the most crucial and transformative episodes in the U.S. history. This bloody clash was fought mainly over disagreements on the issues of slavery and states' rights to have slaves. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860 on a platform that opposed the expansion of slavery into new American territories. 11 southern states, where the economy was heavily dependent on slavery, seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America, led by Jefferson Davis. The conflict opened in April 1861, when Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina, a Union post. This raid heralded the outbreak of a 4-year bloody conflict. It was fought on many fronts, from Virginia through Tennessee to Mississippi. The Union, backed by the more industrious and populous northern states, had significant assets in terms of resources and manpower. The Confederacy of southern states, with a slave-based agricultural economy, grappled with the downside of less industrial infrastructure and less extensive railroad network. Major battles included Antietam, Vicksburg, and with Gettysburg being particularly notable as the war's turning point. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, proclaiming the freedom of slaves in the rebellious states and turning the moral character of the war on its head. It ended when Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. Lincoln was assassinated shortly afterwards, a tragic epilogue to the conflict. The Civil War's aftermath was profound. Slavery was abolished with the 13th Amendment, and the entire course of American history was forever upended. The war also led to approximately 620,000 deaths, making it the deadliest conflict in U.S. history. The period following the war, called Reconstruction, saw efforts to reintegrate the southern states into the Union and to establish civil rights for freed people, although many of these achievements were reversed in the following decades. The Spanish-American War was a short-term but major conflict in the Caribbean and Asia in 1898, in which the United States and the Spanish Empire clashed. The war originated in the independence of Cuba, then a Spanish colony. Cubans had been fighting for their independence for years, and their struggles won sympathy in the United States. U.S. support for the Cuban struggle was nurtured by an intense sensationalist journalism effort, overblowing events to stir up public opinion against Spain. The firing point of the conflict was the USS Maine's mysterious explosion in Havana in February 1898. While the exact cause of the accident was never ascertained, a Spanish mine was blamed for it by the American press and public opinion. The outcry prompted President William McKinley to yield and declare war on Spain. It was a remarkably short affair, only lasting about 4 months. American forces scored quick victories with major actions in the Pacific. such as the Battle of Manila Bay in the Philippines and in the Caribbean, particularly in Santiago de Cuba. The Treaty of Paris, agreed in December 1898, sealed the war. Spain gave up all rights to Cuba and handed over Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines to the United States. Acquiring these territories represented the first time that the United States exercised significant colonial control outside the North American continent. The Spanish-American War caused significant repercussions. It was a milestone for the United States in its transformation into an imperial power, and for Spain, it symbolized the end of its empire. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the second part of this series. See you in the next one!